The April 30th meeting of the Mountain View Wisman Board of Trustees, please come to order. It is 6 p.m. We're meeting tonight in the boardroom at 1400 Montecito Avenue, Mountain View, California. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, Zoom, and on MVWSD.org, and is being recorded. Now, perform the roll call.
Bill Lambert.
Devin Conley.
Anna Reed.
Charles DeFazio. Vice President Henry is absent, but Bill she'll be joining us soon. We have a quorum, and so I will move now to the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Mistral Elementary. Thank you. Before we proceed with the agenda, I wish to remind all attendees that the board welcomes and encourages public participation. We ask that all speakers adhere to the decorum and time limits established by our bylaws, and I'll allocate time during each item for public comments as we see how many speakers we have. The next item of business is the approval of the meeting agenda. Are there any requests from the superintendent or board members to pull, reorder, or remove items from the discussion action section? Seeing none, I'll now take public comment on the approval of the agenda. If anyone in person wishes to comment on this, please turn in a speaker card, or if you're online, use the raised hand function. Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I have a question. Is item 9A? Okay, great.
Do you have a
It will
motion,
stay on the agenda for now.
motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I second.
Right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously, and with Vice President Henry in attendance now. Now we will move on to item 2 on our agenda, the school showcase. Tonight, we're very pleased to feature Mistral Elementary. Calling Superintendent Baer to introduce.
I will just let Claudia take it away. Welcome.
There we go. Good evening, Board President, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Baer, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Claudia Lasiregui. I'm the principal at Gabriela Mistral, and I'm here tonight with some of my 5th graders that are very excited and happy to be here. And they're going to be reading to you their opinion writing as a result of the writing revolution process that they did in response to the reading to Don Quixote de la Mancha. I read it in high school, and I thought it was a really difficult text to understand. And I am very proud to see them read. They're going to read, 2 of them are going to read in English, and 2 of them are going to be reading in Spanish, so that you can see their whole process in our dual immersion program and what the ultimate writing looks like as part of their learning journey at Mistral. So I want to hand it off to Sol Bunge.
Good evening, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Baer, and esteemed guests. My name is Sol Bunge Millan, and I am a 5th grader at Gabriela Mistral, our dual immersion school. Today, I will share our writing process for the essays we wrote as a response to our text on Don Quixote de la Mancha. This page is an organizer for 2 different opinions on the reading of Don Quixote de la Mancha. Is he a hero, or is he a dangerous madman? Pick which opinion you like better, and that will be what you write about. Choose 3 reasons or main ideas to back up your opinion, and these will become your body paragraphs. Write 3 different thesis statements, including your opinion, and 3 different reasons. Then pick your favorite one to use. On the next organizer, choose supporting details and quotes for each of your 3 main ideas. Then do this 2 more times for the next paragraphs. Write a topic sentence and a conclusion sentence for each of your paragraphs using 3 different strategies. A sentence type, a sentence that contains a subordinating conjunction, and a sentence that contains an appositive. Finally, write an introduction and a conclusion. Make sure you use transition words and correct grammar. Now my classmates will share their essays in both English and Spanish.
Good evening, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Bear, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Simi Kataria, and I am a fifth grade student at Gabriela Mistral, our dual immersion school. Todo sobre Don Quijote. Para comenzar, considero que los libros sobre aventuras de personas nos ayudan a conocerlos, aprender sobre sus haciendas, sus intenciones y sus corazones. Igualmente, Don Quijote es una novela que se burla de la Edad Media y trata de un manchego que le gustan los libros de caballería. Además, Don Quijote, un hombre con buenas intenciones, es un chiflado inseguro alucinante porque, en primer lugar, daña y toma cosas que no son suyas, lastima a otras personas y, posteriormente, piensa que su imaginación es real. Desde mi punto de vista, Don Quijote es un loco peligroso porque destruye y toma cosas que no son suyas. Específicamente, Don Quijote destruyó los molinos de viento. Igualmente, tomó la vasija del barbero. Una cita del texto es: Sancho, por su parte, que vio desamparadas las albardas, preguntó a su señor si las podía cambiar por las suyas como botín de la batalla. Página 162. Del mismo modo, esta cita nos enseña sobre el tiempo cuando Don Quijote robó las provisiones del barbero. Quiere ayudar, pero sin embargo, Don Quijote es un chiflado inseguro porque destruye y toma cosas que no son suyas. Para comenzar, Don Quijote, un caballero andante, es un loco peligroso porque lastima a otras personas. En particular, en su aventura en la venta, Don Quijote lastima a una persona que tiró sus armas al suelo. Del mismo modo, dañó al caballero de los espejos. Desde el autor, el texto dice: se le torció la enorme lanza y, con la confusión, chocó con la lanza de Don Quijote. Fue tal el golpe que el de los espejos quedó como muerto en el suelo. Página 175. Esta cita se refiere al tiempo cuando lastimó al caballero de los espejos. A pesar de que Don Quijote quiere ayudar, es un loco peligroso porque lastima a otras personas. Don Quijote, un manchego que quiere ayudar, realmente es un loco peligroso porque piensa que su imaginación es real. El autor dice en el texto: acude, Sancho, y mira lo que has de ver y no has de creer. Advierte lo que pueden los hechiceros y los encantadores. Página 175. Esta cita se refiere a cuando Don Quijote piensa que los encantadores hagan que Don Quijote piense que el caballero de los espejos es el bachiller Sansón. En realidad, sí es Sansón. Para ilustrar, también piensa que los grandes molinos de viento son gigantes. Posteriormente, su imaginación le dice que realmente sí está volando un clavileño a causa de que los sirvientes del duque están usando ventiladores para que piense que es real. Mientras que piensa que está ayudando, Don Quijote realmente es un loco peligroso porque piensa que su imaginación es real. Para cerrar, yo pienso que a pesar de que Don Quijote piensa que ayuda a otras personas, en realidad es un loco peligroso que toma y daña cosas que no son suyas, lastima a otras personas y piensa que su imaginación es real. Desde mi punto de vista, Don Quijote es una novela que se burla de la Edad Media y trata de un manchego que le gusta leer libros sobre caballería. Considero que los libros sobre aventuras de personas nos ayudan a conocerlos, sus haciendas, sus intenciones y sus corazones.
Good evening, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Bear, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jose Bravo, and I am also a fifth grade student at Mistral. Today, I will read Simi's essay in English so that we can be inclusive of our audience. To begin, I believe that books about people's adventures help us get to know them, learn about their possessions, their intentions, and their hearts. Likewise, Don Quixote is a novel that makes fun of the Middle Ages and is about a man from La Mancha who enjoys books of chivalry. In addition, Don Quixote, a man with good intentions, is a delusional and insecure madman because, first of all, he damages and takes things that are not his, hurts other people, and furthermore believes that his imagination is real. From my point of view, Don Quixote is a dangerous madman because he destroys and takes things that are not his. Specifically, Don Quixote destroyed the windmills. Similarly, he took the barber's basin. A quote from the text is, Sancho, for his part, seeing the packs left unattended, asked his master if he could exchange them for his own as spoils of the battle. Page 162. In the same way, this quote shows the time when Don Quixote took the barber's belongings. He wants to help. However, Don Quixote is a delusional and insecure madman because he destroys and takes things that are not his. To continue, Don Quixote, a wandering knight, is a dangerous madman because he hurts other people. In particular, during his adventure at the inn, Don Quixote injures a person who threw his weapons on the ground. Additionally, he harmed the Knight of the Mirrors. According to the author, the text says his enormous lance twisted and into confusion, it struck against Don Quixote's lance. The blow was so great that the Knight of the Mirrors fell to the ground as if dead. Page 175. This quote refers to the time when he injured the Knight of the Mirrors. Even though Don Quixote wants to help, he is a dangerous madman because he hurts other people. Don Quixote, a man from La Mancha who wants to help, is actually a dangerous madman because he believes his imagination is real. The author says in the text, Come, Sancho, and see what you are to witness and not believe. Take note of what enchanters and sorcerers can do. Page 175. This quote refers to when Don Quixote believes that enchanters make him think that the Knight of the Mirrors is the bachelor Sansón. In reality, it is Sansón. Simultaneously, he also believes that the large windmills are giants. Later, his imagination tells him that he is truly flying a clavileno because the Duke's servants use fans to make him think it is real. While he believes he is helping, Don Quixote is actually a dangerous madman because he thinks his imagination is real. To conclude, I think that even though Don Quixote believes he is helping others, he is actually a dangerous madman who takes and damages things that are not his, hurts other people, and believes his imagination is real. From my point of view, Don Quixote is a novel that makes fun of the Middle Ages and is about a man from La Mancha who enjoys reading books about chivalry. I believe that books about people's adventures help us understand them, their possessions, their intentions, and their hearts.
Good evening. Good evening, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Bear, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Emma Chihuela. En mi opinión, yo creo que Don Quijote es un héroe porque le gusta ayudar a las personas. También resuelve problemas de otras personas y pelea por justicia. El libro de Don Quijote es un libro latino muy chistoso y muy divertido por todas las aventuras de Don Quijote. Los libros siempre te ayudan a aprender algo nuevo que no sabías. Don Quijote es una persona que le gusta ayudar a las personas. Don Quijote tiene muchas buenas intenciones porque él decidió ser caballero para ayudar a las personas. También trata de no causar problemas porque él no quiere hacer cosas malas, solo que él piensa cosas ficticias. Y cuando hace cosas malas, no es su intención de hacerlas, porque él piensa que lo malo es lo bueno y lo bueno es lo malo. Decidió hacerse caballero andante como sus personajes para conseguir fama y ayudar a la gente. Página 153. Aunque Don Quijote haga muchas cosas malas, todavía quiere ayudar a otras personas. Don Quijote trata de resolver problemas de otras personas. Don Quijote es un hombre muy bueno que quiere resolver problemas de otras personas, porque no quiere que haya discusiones o nada de peleas. También Don Quijote quiere un pueblo calmado sin problemas para que todos se lleven bien con otras personas. Bueno, señores, ya no soy Don Quijote de la Mancha, sino Alonso Quijano el Bueno. Página 193. A pesar que Don Quijote piensa cosas que no existen, todavía trata de resolver problemas de otras personas. Don Quijote pelea por la justicia. Don Quijote pelea con personas que hacen cosas malas o que quieren lastimar a otras personas. Lo que Don Quijote quiere hacer es proteger a las personas. Como si haya un problema, él se mete en esos problemas para ayudar. Don Quijote, asombrado de la precisión de las señales, le contó que él era ese Don Quijote que jamás había combatido con él. Página 174. En mi opinión, yo creo que Don Quijote es un héroe porque le gusta ayudar a las personas. También resuelve problemas de otras personas y pelea por justicia. El libro de Don Quijote es un poco confuso porque Don Quijote piensa cosas de ficción. Los libros siempre te ayudan a aprender algo nuevo de parte de tu familia o de ti mismo. Good evening, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Bear, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Madeline Cordero. In all types of books, there are people who are heroes and people who are crazy. For example, Don Quixote is a dangerous madman who causes more trouble than good because he hurts other people, hurts himself, and damages property. To begin, Don Quixote, a man who wants to be a knight, causes more trouble than good because he hurts other people. For example, Don Quixote fought a barber with a basin and fell off his donkey. He also attacked the men in the procession. We know this because he let himself fall from the donkey and began to run as fast as his legs allowed him. Page 162. Therefore, even though Don Quixote wants to help people, he is a dangerous madman who hurts others. Don Quixote is a dangerous madman because he hurts himself. He hurts himself because he wanted to fight lions without knowing how dangerous they are. Don Quixote is also thoughtful and sad because he is sick for 6 days. We know this because the text says, for 6 days Don Quixote stayed in bed, sad and thoughtful. Page 191. Although Don Quixote wants to help, he is a dangerous madman because he hurts himself. Don Quixote, a man from La Mancha, is a dangerous madman because he damages property. For example, Don Quixote thinks that windmills are giants. He also destroyed an entire inn. I know this because of fierce battle against those 30 or so outrageous giants. Page 161. While Don Quixote wants to help, he is a dangerous madman because he damages property. To conclude, Don Quixote, a man from La Mancha, is a dangerous madman who causes more trouble than good because he hurts others, hurts himself, and damages property. As a novel, Don Quixote offers readers the opportunity to reflect on their own decisions and the consequences of their actions. The tradition of storytelling will continue to help humans understand the world around them and their place in it.
And that ends our presentation for today. It's very exciting. They've been practicing and coming to my office every day. And they were feeling very proud of their work as well as their biliteracy. And this is a combination of our fifth graders as they came from kinder all the way through fifth grade and moving into middle school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now take a brief 5-minute recess before the board returns to other business, so folks can take photos, things like that. Thank you. We're now back in from recess at 6:24 p.m. We have opportunity for open public comment for items on the closed session agenda. If any members of the public in person wish to address the board regarding this item, turn in a speaker card. And if you're online, use the raise hand function, and I'll wait to see how many speakers we have and then allocate time accordingly. Seeing none, floor is now closed to public comment on the closed session agenda. Before we move to closed session, I wish to announce that I am recusing myself from deliberation on item 4C1 due to a remote interest in the matter as defined under Government Code Section 1091. I will not be present during the board's consideration of this item and will not obtain or review any non-public information regarding this decision. The board will now recess to closed session at 6:25 p.m. board has reconvened in open session at 7:06 p.m. No reportable action was taken. We now move to the consent agenda. These items are considered routine and will be acted upon in one motion. Does any board member wish to remove an item for separate consideration? Seeing none, I'll now move to public comment on the consent agenda. If any member of the public would like to comment on this item, please turn in a speaker card in person or use the raise hand function online. I'll wait to see how many speakers we have. Seeing no speakers, I'll now return to the board.
I move that the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion passes unanimously. We now move to section 7 of the agenda, communications. I believe we don't have employee organizations tonight, so next we'll move on to district committees. Any reports from district committees? Trustee Conley?
Yes, I can report the DLAC committee met earlier this month. And it was a meeting where different organizations came in to share information about the different resources that they make available to the community. One example was the Mountain View Library, for example, did a presentation. So if anyone's interested in that, Skype Bogdanic has the slideshows from the people who were there, but I know I think it's going out to ELACs as well. It was just great to hear about so many amazing opportunities in our community to support students beyond our schools.
Thank you. Any further committees? Now I'll return to Superintendent Bear for the superintendent's report.
Yeah, a couple of items I want to make you aware of. As you know, Crittenden's mock trial team advanced to the state mock trial junior division finals on April 18th down at UCLA School of Law. Our students presented an actual trial to a courtroom of observers and judges. And while many of the teams have been established for years, our new team of just 3 months won a verdict in round 1, as well as 3 individual awards, 2 for outstanding witnesses and 1 for outstanding defense attorney. And we're going to bring them forward to have the board celebrate them at the end of May, at the May 28th board meeting. So we look forward to that. We'd have them earlier, but there are track and field conflicts. So they'll be here just as soon as they can. And I know you join me in congratulating our 135 multilingual learners who have officially reclassified as English proficient. We were all there last week at the joyful ceremony celebrating the hard work of those students, their families, and our dedicated staff. This year, more than 240 students received specialized instruction through our elementary newcomer program and middle school language arts classes. Learning a second or third, in some cases, language is no small feat, and our multilingual students develop strong critical thinking, creativity, and communication skills. And we are very, very proud of our multilingual community. It was great to have Mistral here, sharing that as well tonight. And then finally, several of our schools, specifically Theracov, Mistral, and Castro, have recently celebrated, as recently as today, Dia del Niño, or Children's Day. This day is a celebration held in many Latin American countries to honor and uplift children by recognizing their importance in families and society. And activities included food, games, bubbles, and some very special visitors. So thanks to all the individuals and organizations who made that event special by either contributing or participating or organizing. So that's it for tonight.
Thank you, Superintendent Bear. I'll now open public comment on this item for the communications, item 7. If any members of the public in person wish to address the board, please turn in a speaker card. And if you're online, please use the raise hand function. I'll wait to see how many speakers we have. I see one hand raised for the communication section for any of the committee or superintendent's report. No one in person. I'll pause here. So this will be 3 minutes. The remote speaker, you will have 3 minutes. First up, Lillian Good.
Hi, I wanted to comment on something not on the agenda tonight, because it will be something that will be on your agenda in the
The
future.
next section, sorry. This is just for I'll call it.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry.
This time, I'll open the floor for community comments on items not appearing on tonight's agenda. And remember that the Brown Act prohibits the board from discussing or taking action on any item not listed on the posted agenda. Trustees or staff may briefly respond to clarify facts, or we may direct the superintendent to agendize the matter for a future meeting. I'll now call for speakers in person and online to turn in a speaker card or use the raise hand function to comment on non-agendized items. Okay. Seeing one online. Lillian, now is your time for 3 minutes.
Okay, sorry about that. So I wanted to comment on something not on the agenda tonight because it will be on your agenda in the future. 2 years ago, the district and the board resoundingly heard from the community that preservation of elective choice in middle school was important. Both parents and students reported that electives motivated students to learn and reduced absenteeism as kids wanted to be at school because of these fulfilling classes. The core subjects of math, ELA, science, and history are undoubtedly necessary, but let's stop talking about electives as fluff subjects that have no benefit. It is not debatable that learning a second language when kids' brains are primed for this has major benefits to cognitive growth. But also, middle school Spanish teaches grammar, spelling, reading, writing, geography, culture, and more. Music is a language all on its own, the learning of which helps the developing brain. And it also teaches commitment. Confidence is fully STEM. It may be enjoyable to students, but how great it is to both enjoy your learning and have science and engineering that prepares you for high school and for life. Creative writing is writing. That's ELA. Marine reading and executive reading. These are all examples of electives that reinforce the fundamental core classes, but they're not the only ones that do. Electives are not a waste of time. And for many students, they may be the spark that gives them the desire to learn and to be at school. So next year, when the district tells you that Orenda told them to, and I quote from their executive study, to intentionally limit anything other than the core classes, I ask you to please think about what all options may be and do not blindly follow the recommendation of a for-profit consultant that spent only a few weeks in the halls of our schools. It is possible to both support foundational learning for all and to maintain elective choice. Please thoroughly investigate options beyond the simple reduction of elective periods across the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Good. I believe you got choppy towards the middle a little bit there, so feel free to send us an email as well to convey your thoughts. Thank you. Now we will move on to the discussion and action section. First item is item 9A, next steps with Orenda Education. Superintendent Baer.
Yeah, so I'm going to recommend that we actually pull this agenda item from the current meeting to allow staff additional time for more detailed work. I anticipate bringing this item back to the board before the end of the school year for consideration, and this will ensure that we are well prepared to move forward with the important work ahead and support the success of all students.
Thank you. Yes, this is important work that we're going to be embarking on for a long period, so I don't want to rush into things. So when staff is ready, we'll agendize it. All right. Now moving on to, with that, we pulled item A, and so now item B, Parcel Tax Oversight Committee update. It's a discussion item only and no action will be taken tonight. CBO Westover, I believe you'll be presenting.
Good evening, trustees. So I actually will turn it over to Cleve Frink to present to the board. He is on the PTOC and will present what they've done this year.
I feel a little ambushed here because I've only gotten this request a couple hours ago. So we have, I think, in your packet, a financial review that we reviewed and studied during our normal meetings and so forth. And we believe that it's ready for you, I guess. Is that all I'm supposed to? that good? Yeah, if you guys have any
Cleve,
questions.
you're very humble. Cleve has attended all the meetings and reviewed all of the parcel tax reports. He's
I was just going to say, if you guys have any additional questions that you could, if I would ask that you please send them to our committee so that we could discuss them together, because we have a nice tight group.
Of course, thank you. See, any questions for staff or folks from the board?
Thank you.
None. I'll now open public comment on item 9B. Any member of the public in person wish to address the board regarding this item, please turn in a speaker card. And if you're online regarding this item, please use the raise hand function. I'll wait to see how many speakers we have and then allocate time accordingly. Seeing no one in person and no one online, I'll now return to the board for discussion. Trustee Conley.
I would just like to thank Mr. Frank and everyone on the Parcel Tax Committee for all of your work that you've done, shepherding our public dollars and making sure that the district is using them in a way that's accountable to voters. So thank you for your time and your work.
I would also like to add that the committees, both parcel tax and a bond oversight, need more members. It's really hard sometimes to get quorum, and so more members make it possible to get there. And also, there's a last minute cancellation, so I really am thankful that Mr. Frink was here to fill in the gap.
Any further discussion? All right. I think I had a wonderful time reviewing the documents. I think so as folks know, I tend to dig into these things. So I really appreciate all the work that the public does in supporting this, right? Like it giving us this oversight and making sure that like the community's tax dollars are being spent well. So thank you. All right, with that, I will now, hearing no further discussion, we'll now move on to item 9C, the Bond Oversight Committee update. This is again, discussion item only and no action will be taken tonight. CBO Westover can start us off, introduce.
Sure. We actually have James Perkins here, who is our chair, who will present for the Bond Oversight Committee.
Hey, I'm here to represent the Bond Oversight Committee, which includes Nimi Berman, Betsy Fowler, Cleve Frank, Antya Kishner, me, Doug Radke, and John Stewart. In the agenda, we have a letter about all the things we did this year. We've met 4 times, and we are just looking over to make sure Measure T funds are being used in the proper fashion. Under our supervision, every dollar goes to where it's supposed to be going. And that's kind of what we're due. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? All right, seeing none, I'll now open public comment on this item. If any member of the public wishes to speak on this item, turn in a speaker card in person or use the raise hand function online. I'll wait to see if we have any speakers. Seeing none, I'll now return to the board for discussion. Trustee Conley.
I'd like to issue the same thanks to the Bond Oversight Committee and everyone who's been participating there to make sure that, again, the funding that we have, it's being distributed in a way that's accountable to voters and there's transparency around it. So thank you for your work. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think this is a very timely item with the facilities update coming later in the meeting, which was paired well reading these together and seeing that we're choosing how to spend these dollars. I think we should maybe future meeting discuss recruitment and making sure that we can fill this because I know it's a lot of work and I want to make sure we're not burning people out doing this. So next with that, any further discussion? No, okay. We'll now move on to item D, multilingual learner program update. This is again discussion only. No action will be taken tonight. Director Chang and Ms. Poor present.
Good evening. Let's see. Good evening, trustees. My name is Margaret Poore, and I'm the English Language Development's teacher on special assignment for Mountain View Wisman, which means that I work with teachers, coaches, and administrators with regard to designated ELD, English Language Development, and integrated ELD, Language Development. Tonight, I'm giving our annual update on the program for English learners, otherwise known as multilingual learners or MLLs. I'll be using these terms kind of interchangeably. And Director Chang is here as well. The goal of the presentation is to update the board on the impact of the varied efforts that the district engages in to support this key group that makes up approximately 20% of our students. So we align our work to the strategic plan, specifically goal area 1. And first we'll talk about the goals of the program. In the interest of time, I'll present the high-level information, and there's additional informational slides in the appendix. Our multilingual learner group is very diverse and includes English learners, newcomers, long-term English learners, and reclassified fluent English proficient students, which we refer to as RFEP students. We measure and identify progress, identify students and measure progress with our initial LPAC, our summative LPAC, alternate LPAC, and interim LPAC assessments. We also use district and state academic measures for students. And we center our work around 3 main goals. First, we want our multilingual learners to improve their English each year. We want our MLLs to reclassify by the time they've been in U.S. schools for a research-based time frame of 5 to 7 years. And after they reclassify, we want our students to continue progressing academically at high levels. So if we look at our goal number 1, it asks, are students advancing each year as measured by LPAC in the 4 domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing? So in this presentation, we'll look at data from a lot of different sources. Each one has its basis and a perspective. And we'll present a variety of data so we can get a comprehensive view of the program. But the main point is that our areas of strength and areas of weakness are often way more nuanced than they first appear in the numbers. So we want to start with our California dashboard data. It's the English Learner Progress Indicator, otherwise referred to as LP. These are our measurements for the last 3 years. And as you probably know, the California dashboard uses current performance level and change in performance level to calculate what range on the color band you fall on. So if we take a look at this slide, the percentage of our students making progress on the LP has been around 50% for the last 3 years, which is considered medium performance on a 5 performance range scale. The change performance level between 24 and 25 is now in the maintained range instead of declined, which is why our indicator now points to yellow instead of orange. So that's been a step forward. So what does it mean to measure LP performance? LP progress is another way to look at our students' progress year over year. It's a more granular measure than overall LPAC score. It matches our goal of progressing students towards reclassification within 5 to 7 years. It breaks the 4 LPAC levels down into 6 LP levels. And so it gives us a yearly goal to aim for. We see here on this slide that our 2025 LP progress is largely similar to our 2024 progress. Our percentage of MLL students who progressed the level, raised a level, dropped about 2% as a whole group. And the percentage of students maintaining a 4, which is the highest level, without reclassifying, has risen about 0.6%. So we've kind of redistributed a couple of percent, but it's very similar, comparable to the 2024 data. Our next goal is about reclassification. So reclassification means that our student has met the criteria that indicate that they're now at a similar academic level as their English-only peers. With this goal, there are two parts. One is typically for the end of elementary school years, and one is typically for the end of middle school years. So specifically, we would like 75% of our MLLs to be reclassified after completing 6 years in US schools, and 85% of our MLLs to be reclassified after completing 8 or more years in US schools. And just to remind ourselves of the reclassification criteria, all general education students and most students with IEPs, in order to reclassify, must score an overall 4 on the LPAC summative test. They also must meet or exceed standards on an academic test, and we get teacher recommendation and parent consultation as part of that. And then for students with IEPs who take the alternate LPAC, they must score 3 out of 3 overall on the alternate LPAC. They must demonstrate growth on at least one secondary measure, and the IEP team meets and comes to consensus on recommending them for reclassification. So this slide talks about our reclassification rate over time. It shows the 23-24, 24-25, and 25-26 reclassification rates. So you can see in 23-24 that our rate was 15.07%. 24-25, our rate was 19.68%. And this current year, we are currently at 12.51%. And I've put the word so far because the year isn't over yet. Yet the obvious thing is, why is it 12%? Why is the 25-26 rate lower? And there are 3 reasons why it's lower than the other years. One of them is last year we made the decision to reclassify before the end of the school year 6th and 7th graders before, so that those numbers were counted in the 24-25 numbers. We had always reclassified 5th and 8th graders, but we added the 6th and 7th graders because this means that they wouldn't enter the school year with an incorrect schedule right off the bat. So those numbers shifted, and that was about 2%. We also have new state guidance, which says that students with IEPs must now score a 4 on the summative LPAC in order to reclassify. It had been a 3. So we had about a 1.5% addition. 1.5% of our 19 there was students with IEPs who had scored a 3 and were able to reclassify under those rules. Now we cannot do that. So that kind of lessens our candidate pool. And then 25-26 is not done yet. So as soon as we get the 20-26 LPAC scores back, we will be reclassifying additional students. And we estimate that we will land between 15 and 16%. Okay, so now we've looked at the overall reclassification rate for the district as a whole. And next we'll look at reclassification data for the 2 groups that we have specific goals for. So first we'll look at charts about students who have been in US schools for 6 years. The pie charts show the percentages of students who have reclassified, shown as RFEP, and the percentage of students who remain English learner. In all of the charts, we want to see more yellow and less blue. The percentage of 6-year students who have reclassified in 2026 is 5.8% lower than last year, and it is 15% lower than the students 2 years ago. And I'll have some comments on this later in the presentation. The top charts here contrast socioeconomically disadvantaged RFEP and EL students. The bottom charts contrast non-SED and RFEP and EL students. Left to right is last year versus this year. I want to remind us that currently 68% of our EL students are SED, and many are progressing on schedule. Throughout these slides, it's important to keep in mind that this is one cohort, 1 year, and this is the group that is finishing 6 years in US schools. We have data on other cohorts, most of which are progressing satisfactorily, but this one appears to have been affected by the school closures and the pandemic. If you roll back 6 years, these were the students who were youngest. On the next slide, we have a similar disaggregation. Top charts show Hispanic, Latino, RFEP, and EL students. The bottom charts show non-Hispanic Latino, RFEP, and EL students. And finally, we see also a gap between the MLLs who have an IEP versus students who do not. These charts have smaller total numbers of students, so each student makes up a bigger chunk of wedge in the pie. And as we said earlier, we received a change in the state guidance last year, which is affecting 2026 and forward reclassification rates of students with disabilities. Our next section is about reclassification of our students who have been in U.S. schools for 8 or more years. Our goal is to have reclassified 85% of these students. So we see that most of the students in the 8 or more years group are graduating 8th graders, and there was a 5% gain over last year and a 1% gain over 2 years ago. So we are meeting our 85% goal here for the 8-year students. When we look here, we see that there are smaller gaps between the SED and non-SED students than there were with the 6th-year students. And here we see a gap, but a smaller gap between the Hispanic, Latino, and non-Hispanic Latino students than we did with the 6th-year comparable groups. And again, similarly, we see a smaller gap between the students with disabilities and students without disabilities than we did in the 6th-year students, even with this new state guidance. So the 8th-year group is meeting more of our expectations, which is good to see. And gaps need to be addressed. So just to review, research shows that a typical reclassification timeframe for students is 5 to 7 years. We wanted to find out on average how long it takes our students to reclassify. So we broke down our analysis into students without IEPs and students with IEPs. And the way we calculated this was among the already reclassified students, how long had it taken in years for them to reclassify? And we found that students without IEPs on average reclassify after 3 years, and students with IEPs reclassify after 5 years. This is lower than the 5 to 7 because what we are, the way that's calculated is by the time they exit high school, what was the average of all students who ever reclassified during that time. So we have students who have not reclassified yet. But this is kind of a snapshot to see what the time frame usually is. Let's see. And our third goal is for reclassified students to continue to progress in academics after reclassification. These are the 2025 CASP scores, which you have seen before. Overall on CASP, RFEPs underperform EOs by about 20%. We do have some bright spots where RFEP students are performing similarly or better than their EO peers, namely at Castro, Imai, Stevenson, and Vargas. And now that we've examined some data for each of our MLL programs, 3-pronged mission, it's time to take stock. Some key considerations that we have are that each year we have different students, including newcomers, which come into our district with a wide variety of language needs. And our MLL group changes every time we reclassify somebody. They move from one group to the other group, and this ensures a really large gap between unreclassified MLL students and either the EOs or the RFEP students. The 3 factors that we've identified that contribute to our current reclassification rate being lower than the 2 previous years are the widened candidate pool, adding the 6th and 7th graders to reclassification before the end of the year, and the narrowed candidate pool, raising the qualifications for students with IEPs to reclassify. And this year's not over, so we will be reclassifying some more students. Multilingual learners who are SED and or Hispanic and or are students with disabilities have disproportionately worse outcomes than those who are not. We found that MLL and RFEP students' progress has been inconsistently monitored and used at the site level. We've identified that listening of the 4 domains is now a greater concern than writing for students who are behind and in year 4 in learning English or beyond as a specific group. But that's a change. We also see a 1 to 2% increase in at risk of LTL and LTL long-term English learner students each year since 2024. The other findings that we have are one bright spot is on our LP front is that 85% of our students maintained or gained an LP level in the past year, which means that not many students are slipping backwards, which is good, except we really want them to also be moving forwards. Another bright spot is our long-term English learner students. 62% of them made progress or maintained the highest score level, which means that the LTL group outperformed our general EL. A couple of reasons we think this might have happened is, one is we had increased focus on multilingual learners at middle school, which is where the LTL students are. We increased communication of the importance of classification with the students. And for the last 2 years, we've had additional training specifically for our ELD teachers at middle school, which is, introduced more effective strategies and everybody's rowing in the same direction. Also, we have 0 out of 8 students taking the summative alternate LPAC this past year gained an LP level. So they either remained at a 2 or dropped from a 2 to a 1 or remained at a 1. And then finally, again, 68% of our current MLOs are socioeconomically disadvantaged. 78% are Hispanic Latino, and 62 are members of both of those groups. Our SED, Hispanic Latino, and students with disability are overrepresented in the group that is not progressing on schedule. So we have some ongoing efforts and next steps. These are our task areas in bold. And first, thank you for coming to the reclassification ceremony. That's our happiest day of the year, and it was so great that you were all there. There's a lot of work to be done on integrated English language development, which we also call core instruction, and designated ELD, which needs to be connected with core instruction. Some issues we see in the MLL program include the need to move students more quickly through the LP levels to an LPAC 4 level. We need to reclassify students, which means that they need to have that 4 on the LPAC plus the academic scores, which is very key. And thirdly, we need to support students after reclassification in core instruction so that they can grow in sync with their EO peers, English-only peers. And I think that the issues that we see in the MLL program are part and parcel of the same root issues that we've seen across the instruction program. Alignment across classrooms and between grade levels, between designated ELD and core instruction. That work really needs to support the mastery of grade level material by all students. And this is the work that the Arenda report has recommended. That's truly needed in order for us to equitably instruct our students. We need everybody to have the same high level expectations. And of course, as we welcome new teachers and staff to MVWSD, we want to make sure that we're all working on common, consistent goals for language learners. The teachers, the coaches, and the administrators are really excited about the upcoming work and look forward to getting started. And with that, if you have questions, we can answer them.
Thank you. I'll turn to the board for questions. Any clarifying questions? Trustee Gottlieb?
I saw Trustee Henry getting ready.
I wanted to clarify, when you talk about meeting and exceeding standards on an academic test, is that CASP specifically?
Yes.
Okay.
It's one of 3. There are 3, and you need to meet one of them. One of them is CASP, ELA. One of them is iReady reading, and one of them is literally another reading score. They need to be on grade level or above.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It's great to get an update. Ostensibly, the Mistral Dual Immersion Program is meant to address multilingual learners. And when we look at dual immersion programming, my understanding is that that goal is closer to the 6 to 8 years, like what you were talking about. Is it possible, and I should have written this in before, so I don't expect you to have an answer now, but should we be examining the outcomes for the students who are going through dual immersion in comparison to their peers who are also Spanish speaking, since that's such a large portion of our multilingual learners, to look at whether or not that program is being effective at that goal?
Yes, we can look into that.
Okay.
Mhm.
I just have one question, I think. When will we see kind of the finalized numbers after like the spring LPAC, and will it be like normalized so we can kind of make some inference across years, or?
So we'll execute that like in the final days of school.
Mhm.
And I don't know when the next report is that comes out, but would you know that? Or Kathy, when would they find that out?
Have the numbers
Yeah.
and we'll finalize them right at the end of the year summer, so we could add it to a board update right at the
That'd be-
beginning of the year.
That'd be
Does
fantastic.
that work?
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Trustee Lambert?
Yeah, just real simple. I'm not going to express it very well, but I think I mentioned it to Director Chang, so I think he'll understand. Do you track newcomers' scores um, and non-newcomer scores sort of separately and see so you can see different trajectories in their improvement or not improvement? Do you do that?
We do track, we track things in several different ways. Sometimes we look at grade level. Sometimes we look at how many years a student has been in US school. That's why we started really using that language, because we might have somebody coming into third grade, but they may be in their first year of English. That's kind of why we started talking about it that way. We do some analysis of newcomer growth in schools where our newcomer teachers are active versus students with similar years in US schools where there isn't a newcomer teacher active. And we've seen that the ones where the newcomer specialists are there, outperform the other ones. I don't know if that,
No, I think that helps. I mean, you're basically just confirming you're looking at these kind of things.
yeah.
Or to
Mhm.
try to understand, what's effective and what isn't,
Right, exactly.
and why, right?
Yes.
Trustee Conley?
That actually reminded me of another question, which is I'm curious about the chronic absenteeism rates for these cohorts of students too. I don't know if there's anything there, but I'm just curious if we're seeing that play out in especially some of the groups that have a larger gap around reclassification.
I don't have that data for you right now, but we can look into it for sure.
Seeing no further questions, I'll now turn to public comment on this item. If any member of the public wishes to make a comment, please turn in the speaker card in person or use the raise hand function online. I'll wait to see how many speakers we have. Seeing none, I will now return to the board for discussion. Any discussion? Trustee Conley?
It's always useful to get this update and kind of see how we're doing on these goals. There's more information that trustees are curious about. So when it's available, that's wonderful that you can provide it. Thank you. And thank you for all of your work on this.
Yeah, I think for me, yes, thank you all for the work you're doing. I think the thing that jumped out to me, just threading this across some of the discussions we've been having, like the inconsistent site level monitoring really reminds me of some of the data systems issues we've talked about internally with the system study we've been doing. So I'm eager to see if our strategic plan and professional development measurably improving this. How that might look, how we might track that, I think is maybe an open question, or any indicators of progress on that. But that's something that I think is a good way to tie these things together. And then similarly, we have some bright spots and some trouble spots here, making sure that we integrate this with the rest of the work we're doing rather than spinning up new initiatives, I think is a good reminder for us to again avoid Christmas treeing this, even though we have things we need to address. And I'm excited to see that staff thinks that a lot of the work we're doing, the foundational things, will help here. So I think that I'm excited for the future. Other discussion? All right. Thank you again. We'll now move to discussion and action item 9E. This is the Master Facilities Plan update. I believe Director CEO Westover will be presenting this.
Good evening. This evening, I also have Rob Murray, who did our demographic study, and Jean Young, who will be presenting with us. So this is a brief overview of our master facility update process. This is not intended to go in detail into any one area, just a general overview for the board to provide some feedback, responses, and if there's anything in particular that over this summer, as we're working on the master facility plan update, that you would like to see us work on. So give me a moment and I'll share my screen.
Rebecca, I just also add this is going to be an opportunity for the board to ask questions about the demographic study that we're embarking on as well, correct?
Yes, correct. I'm not going to read through this piece. So a little bit of background. We had savings due to the proactive planning that we did prior to starting Measure T. We were able to accelerate our projects and accelerate our timeline. And as a result, we saved approximately $24 million in savings by delivering the projects ahead of schedule. And actually, right before coming back from COVID, we were able to redo the majority of all of our HVAC units. So these savings can now be used to take on future projects. In preparation for Measure T, actually, I just covered this. We did do the master facility plan in 2019. And since that time, the majority of Priority 1 projects have been completed. An update to the 2019 MFP is now needed to reflect the district's current needs and guide the allocation of remaining Measure T funds. As the remaining funds are not sufficient to address all the needs, thoughtful prioritization will be essential moving forward. So whenever we create our master facility plan, of course, our needs or our desire list is always more than what we can fit with the funding that we have allocated. So this is a proposed process and timeline. So March through April, we'll develop the foundational information for update, including what we're doing tonight, demography, enrollment projections, space use, utilization, planning themes, and updated high-level cost estimates. We have 3 teams working with us: King Consulting, HHF Planners, and Greystone West, who will update the project cost estimates. So tonight, we're presenting a high-level findings to the board and requesting guidance on additional questions, scenarios, and priorities to be considered in the update. From May through September, we'll refine the draft master facility plan update based on your feedback tonight, including project priorities, planning options, and updated cost information. And then in September, we'll bring forward the draft updated master facility plan as a discussion item for board review and feedback. So I'll turn it over to Rob.
All right, thank you, Dr. Westover. And just confirming everyone can hear me right now.
Yes.
Wonderful. So, as was said, we have gone underway and assembled a lot of data and information that will go into the full demographics analysis and enrollment projections report that you will receive soon. And really just wanted to come here tonight to give you some of the initial findings of that, and definitely to answer any early questions and to get any specific questions that you have that we can make sure to address in that report once it's done. So with that note, we'll go through a few slides here of information. And the first one is that looking back over the last 10 years of enrollment data and seeing the pattern that we see across a lot of school districts in California and the Bay Area of enrollments were higher 10 years ago than they are now, had a one-time major drop in the 2020-21 school year with the COVID-19 pandemic. And since then, what looks like kind of a stabilization and recovery. But if you look at that bottom screen, you also see that that period where enrollments have increased since 2021 and 2022 coincides with the expansion of transitional kindergarten. So you do have to keep that in mind. And then looking also at that bottom chart, With the dark blue, this is, and I'll circle back to this in just a moment, but the single biggest thing that we're really looking at with your district's enrollment trends is the size of that incoming kindergarten cohort each year. And that has, of course, dipped from above 600 in most years just a decade ago to now below 500 for 4 consecutive years. Though, with the addition of the TK students, you see your combined TK and K is actually higher now than it was 10 years ago. So again, the facility needs you have for those youngest learners are, of course, still need to be balanced with the fact that overall enrollment is decreasing and cohorts are getting smaller. So next slide, please. So before we get into some of those demographics, one point I really wanted to focus on here tonight is residential development and student generation, because these are points that I believe have been a big talking point here in your community. And it's sort of looking at it here tonight to acknowledge it and also sort of set it off to the side of here's what we know and what we think will happen and the extent to which that's going to nudge the larger demographic trends that we're talking about. So for student generation rates, that's the first part of it. And that is when we talk development, how many students are we going to get out of it? And that depends on a few things. But at this high level, we're really looking at main types of housing. So if you have a single family home, i.e. one that only, is usually purchased, and if it's detached, has, does not share walls with anyone else, usually has its own yard. If it's attached, might be condos, might be townhomes. Uh, those, a single family detached home, to the extent that any of those are being built, is going to generate, when you see that number at the bottom, 0.29, I like to translate that into if you build 100 homes, you would expect there to be about 29 students, grades TK to 8, and enrolled in your district living in them. And you look at that across the other types of housing, and you see the multifamily, and that is just market rate, what tend to be apartments or other kind of rental housing, and literally about one student out of every 100 units. And again, this is not extrapolating, this is looking at recent construction in your district. And it's just as exciting as it sounds, looking at your student address list, compiling everyone who lives at addresses that we know have been constructed, and seeing how many students you actually yielded from recent housing projects within your school district. And then, of course, when you add an affordable or below market rate component to any kind of housing, it does tend to generate more students. That is much more attractive for the younger families who are more likely to have school-age children. So with these student generation rates in mind, I want to look at the next slide, which is keeping an eye on all of the projects, largely in City of Mountain View, that we have our eye on. And there, if you look at the numbers, it's eye-opening, almost 10,000 units that we can track on the city's planning documents. But keeping those generation rates in mind and knowing that a lot of these units are that market rate multifamily development that yields only a single student on average for every 100 units built, we are looking at all of these units collectively, generating about 463 students by the time they are fully developed. And that's the other catch, is that if you look at the table on the bottom there, only about 550, give or take, of these units are actively under construction, and another more than 2,000, which is a fair number, but still the minority of the total that we're talking about are even fully approved. A lot of these others are proposals that are under review. And then, of course, you have the large red transparent areas that are those precise plans where you have a total amount of housing that's part of that plan, but a lot of those haven't even translated into specific project applications yet. And so we are tracking a lot of these, but what this really means, if you just look at those upper two categories of under construction and approved, of projects that we anticipate based on recent student generation, would give you not even 100 more students. So again, it's not insignificant, but compared to some of the demographic trends I'll be showing you in a moment, these are small fish swimming next to whales. So if we want to go to the next slide, just a quick recap of kind of what we're talking about. That short term, projects approved or under construction, that was those fewer than 100 students. So we are tracking those. We want to build those into the projections. And to the extent that we have things in those categories, we're really looking at a couple of your school boundaries in Vargas and Thorikov. And I apologize if I have mispronounced that as the way the locals would. You can correct me if I was mistaken, but those school boundaries will be the ones that probably see the bulk of what student generation there is. But of course, there are a couple of projects in some other areas. And then we get out to all those projects under review. Hopefully, we see more of those within that 5 to 10 year horizon. And then again, those specific plan areas, we're really just keeping an eye on to see when at some point some of those turn into more specific applications. And now on to, I would say, the real meat of what I want to show you tonight, which is the initial takeaways of a demographic look at your enrollments and particularly local births. Because this, as I mentioned, the engine that drives your enrollment trends is going to be how many incoming kindergartners do you have every year? And each year that one of those kindergarten cohorts comes in, who are they replacing? Which fifth graders are moving up to middle school, or which eighth graders are matriculating into your high school district? And essentially, quote unquote, those places, if not literally the same seats, are being taken by a new incoming kindergarten cohort. So your green box there roughly corresponds births between 2012 and 2020 with who you have enrolled right now. And you can see that for those students who are currently in the middle school grades, they started off with birth cohorts of around 700 plus students. The current kindergarten cohort was bound to about 635. At the time that the 2020 births were in the book, that was the lowest birth total of the 21st century for you. Every single year since then, you've had a lower birth total, and those are the students that are waiting in the wings to come in and take the place of some of the students you have now. Now, there's more to it than that. We do track how your student populations change on net over time. You're constantly having people move into and move out of your district, and we track all of that. But the single biggest thing, especially because for you, you tend to be ever so slightly positive through elementary school. You tend to lose a few students between fifth and sixth grade most years. And the end result of that is about a plus or minus 0.5% on net of that total net cohort growth. So really what we're looking at is once you have one of these cohorts in the long term, it's probably going to be about the same size. So it really is accurate to say every time that box slides over from year to year, you have a high birth year, high population year relatively dropping out the back end, although by dropping out, I mean advancing to high school, which is great. And then on the front end, you have these increasingly small birth cohorts that are really the foundation of any district, is the people who live here have kids, and in 4 to 5 years, you start enrolling those kids. There just aren't as many of them. And again, just being very clear on that, literally the 5 lowest birth years in the 21st century are the 5 years you have coming up in the immediate future. So next slide, please. And this is what that looks like. You can see right now. So again, this is my preliminary take on your enrollment projections district-wide by grade. Kind of ignore the giant wall of numbers for now and focus mainly on just this year. You have just under 500, 498 eighth graders that were enrolled as of Census Day. Those students, you know, are leaving you after this year and replacing them. We anticipate based on the births and based on the ratio of those births that tend to materialize for you as kindergarten enrollments, about 447 kinders next year. And that is a drop of 41 students, and that's almost exactly what we see in the bottom line. Again, almost every single cohort, if you follow it down and to the right, you can track, this year's first graders become next year's second graders. And a lot of those numbers will change a little bit, but on net, those tend to not show a lot of net growth or loss, really. It's going to be that difference every year of who's coming in and who's going out. And you can see, following the gold bar at the bottom across, that you will just have that sort of steady ratcheting down effect of fewer kinders coming in and taking the place of larger cohorts. And you'll also see with those subtotals in italics that this is really going to affect the elementary school grades predominantly. One reason for that is just a little quirk. You occasionally see just one year that has a particularly small or large cohort, and your middle schools just happen to enroll in sixth grade a relatively small cohort. And that, in some ways, insulates them a little bit because that small cohort is going to be there for the next couple of years. And then they don't get another small cohort, i.e., the 2023 kindergarten cohort that came in at 454 until 2029. And that's when you'll start to see the middle school going down again. But in the meantime, they're actually going to go up in the short term because they're going to be replacing that small cohort that they already have. Meanwhile, in the elementary schools, you're going to see fifth grade at around 500 students for the next few years leaving, and something in the low to mid 400s coming in. So again, this is sometimes there's there are lots of other things we look at. This is the single most significant one. So next slide, please. And the other part of what we're doing here is, of course, looking at these projected enrollment numbers and comparing them with your site capacities and room utilization. And so there's a few rules and caveats here. When we say capacity, what we mean here is the way that these rooms are being utilized this year. It's sort of your utilization or your realistic capacity. And that means that some of these capacities could be higher if you took some rooms that are being used for something other than a standard, teacher teaching a grade level in a classroom, because you have things like art or music pullouts, you have resource rooms, you have all sorts of other things that classrooms can be used for, especially at the elementary schools. And then the total enrollment is based on by grade level from the numbers that you just saw. And just looking at how that space is being utilized across the district. At TK, you are using most of the space that you have, and we're actually anticipating that there will still be some growth in TK just based on more families opting into that over time and might overfill the space you currently have available. But everywhere else, you're really looking at being somewhat utilized at this point and overall utilizing less of that capacity as time goes on. And then on the next slide, we are just breaking it down slightly differently by school. And here's where, again, these individual school projections, there's probably some refinement that we might do depending on some planning assumptions, depending on, again, looking at if any of those larger development projects, particularly some of the ones that are, say, affordable housing, will come in. Some of these could change a little bit, and it's more significant if you're adding 10 or 20 students to a single elementary school than you are looking at district-wide numbers. So we do want to keep all of that in mind always. But you can see here just how it works out school by school. Some schools are not decreasing as much. A couple of them are even projected to increase based on just what we're seeing with who's in there now, who's going to be leaving, and the share of the kindergarten cohort that they tend to attract and enroll. But generally, the pattern, as you see on the top, there is more space between those blue lines and the red lines of that 7-year out enrollment. So again, just a very quick high-level look at some of the data that we put together to date. Again, this will all be assembled along with lots of other information into a full report that you'll get to peruse. But for tonight, once we see a little bit more content from Mr. Young and Dr. Westover, we'll be happy to answer questions on the demographics.
All right, now I'll turn it over to Jean, who's going to talk a little bit through space use.
Great, thank you. So in the 2019, the Master Facilities Plan was prepared and identified projects in 4 priority areas. As Rebecca mentioned, Priority 1 projects focused on safety, energy, operational efficiency, and those have largely been completed with Measure T. A lot of the Priority 2 and Priority 3 projects were focused on utilities and infrastructure and various campus enhancements. Priority 4 projects, which were not completed, focused on growth and overall site efficiency. Next slide. What this meant is that in Priority 1, lighting projects, gate projects, fence projects, perimeter controls, solar, shade, mechanical ventilation, and window projects were completed. In priority 2 and priority 3, roofing and kind of ongoing through this summer, roofing projects, utility projects, telecom, outdoor learning projects have been completed. Playgrounds, however, were not. In priority 4, we had new classrooms to expand capacity, restrooms, landscaping, and trails. A lot of the growth associated with priority 4 was based on sort of pre-COVID plans that Google had in North Bayshore and East Wispin, which both had much higher ceilings in terms of development. Google has since backed off a lot of their plans since then. Next slide. So this is just a slide in terms of what was published and socialized with the community as part of the Measure T bond in 2020. You can see kind of the equitable distribution of projects and needs that were addressed on different school sites. And it's part of the communications program for the district. Next slide. So in terms of the update to the 2019 Master Facility Plan, some themes that the district leadership have identified include what projects from the MFP were not completed and are still a priority, the impacts of recent events and policy updates, including the return of Google's leased properties, the start of the TK program district-wide, and then the need to position properties for the future. This includes flexibility for schools to align with some of the enrollment trends that Rob was talking about, how to integrate or reuse the leased properties, and how to optimize facilities for MOT and central kitchen. As you know, right now, MOT is distributed in 2 locations and are embedded in both the Graham and Crittenden campuses. And central kitchen is embedded within the Crittenden campus, even though it serves the entire district. One of the questions that the leadership has been asking is, the district has a neighborhood concept approach with regards to schools, and whether that concept should equally apply to TK, given that TK is a new program and there are opportunities potentially to consolidate it. Next slide. What this translates to in terms of tasks that we've been starting to look at are the utilization of existing classroom spaces, as Rob touched on. What are the best uses for Slater, the Slater campus, the district office portables next to Darakoff and Stevenson, the best use for the Cooper site, which is currently leased to the Action Day Care program. How should the TK program be organized in terms of geography and sites? And what opportunities are available for MOT and Central Kitchen to relocate off of Graham and Crittenden to expand capacity for reconfiguring the middle schools for future growth or for more efficient, facilities? Are there potential partnering and leasing opportunities in this regard and others? What are the priority grouping of projects as we move into, this update? And then how do we incorporate and address future demographic trends? So some of the key questions that the district leadership wanted to put to all of you tonight are there additional priorities or areas the district should consider as part of this update? Which needs should be prioritized in the short term? If consolidation creates opportunities to free up space at neighborhood schools, are there district programs or departments that could be relocated or centralized? And what opportunities exist to expand district capacity to support where growth is occurring, given that growth may be uneven across the district? And also, what guiding principles should be used to prioritize projects moving forward? So with that, I'll go ahead and return the mic to Rebecca.
So we have, we're looking for some board feedback, and maybe if there's questions.
Clarifying questions from the board? President Henry.
In the demographic slides, specifically on the enrollment projections, I was wondering, like, what's the relationship between the birth year numbers and for, a group that will end up in kindergarten in any given year, and how you project how many of that group will actually come into our district? And then kind of similar question, but a little different, is with TK, since kindergarten is not required either, but there's even less of kind of right now, it's been less of an expectation that everybody does TK, and more, some people stay in their preschools. Is there any thought on like whether that trend will change over time, that a higher percentage of the birth group will end up in TK versus like half-ish that you're projecting?
Yeah, no, that's good questions. And I'll start with the kindergarten one first, which is that yes, we look at the births as I showed you, and we directly compare that with a 5-year lag of how many kindergarten enrollments you had. And you have exhibited what I kind of like to call a classic pattern and taking into account the COVID-19 pandemic years, where you had been sitting at a ratio of close to about 80% of births in a given year translating into kindergarten enrollments. And then you dipped down to as low as about 68 to 69% for in 2022 and 2023. And that's really due to something I saw in a lot of districts around the state, whereby it became a lot less likely that a student who was born just prior to 2020, so in those 2017, 18, 19 birth years, was still going to be living in the same place they were born 5 years later, when you had this big line in the sand of the initial COVID-19 pandemic. And now that we're getting more removed from that, certainly in fall of 2026, all of your TK and all of your kindergarten students should have been born post-COVID, but we're already seeing the current year, your ratio had climbed back up to a 0.75. And so that I am anticipating you to continue pulling in something at least around that level, if not inching back up closer to that 0.8 level. And so that will help on the kindergarten side, but that's what we're looking at. And, it's great when that ratio is steady. In your case, there was a dip, but it's very explainable. And just the fact that you've been increasing that ratio over the last couple of years shows me that it's quite feasible that it will continue perhaps to increase just a little bit more over the next couple of years. And then with transitional kindergarten, again, with a little bit of a shorter lag, we're still looking at the ratio. And yours has been just an almost perfect straight line up over the last 4 years of the rollout of the transitional kindergarten eligibility expansion into this year being the first year of universal TK for every 4-year-old. Again, as you said, not compulsory, but obligatory for you, to enroll them should they want to. And so you've climbed very steadily up from 10% of births coming into your TK program back before it expanded, and then growing by about 7 to 8% per year up to 41% this year of births. And as we said, there's no more expansion of eligibility coming up, but I do anticipate there still being a steady increase, because now the question becomes, independently, we're looking at how many kindergartners we expect, which has a much more long-term trend line that we can look at. And of those, a certain number are also coming to you for TK, and there exists that opportunity to close that delta a little bit, to have more of the kids that you know you're going to get for kindergarten anyway to also come to you for TK. Some of this, I think, will be natural in that despite everyone's best efforts, I think not everyone fully knows about the TK opportunity yet. Some of it is just more normally cultural. I know my own daughter, who's 14 now and in 8th grade, was born in February and was not eligible for TK, and we would have loved it if we had had the opportunity at the time, uh, all those years ago. But so some people I know have obviously jumped on it. Some people need a little more convincing. But I think for especially people that are having those first kids, who are engaging with the school district for the first time and finding out about TK, not having already had a kid go through a few years ago and thinking that they, are just going to do the exact same thing, that we will just see some TK increasing. I've been saying this in districts up and down the state of California over the last year or so, and this upcoming fall will be the chance that we finally have a data point to see if we're seeing that percent of births capture rate for TK increase in 2026 over what it was in 2025, the first year everyone was eligible. That's going to be a huge data point moment for us for sure. But I personally do think you are going to see some continued modest growth there.
And I had asked Rob this exact question one of the times we had met, and I think the answer, or the wondering we all have, is will TK enrollment percentages ever get to the point where they match kinder enrollment percentages, right? Whatever a district's particular enrollment is. And I just think that's a wait to see. It is more complicated because, or it is more challenging because TK room requirements are far different than, if we were asking this about third grade, well, it's just another, 960 square foot classroom, but TK has other considerations.
Trustee Conley?
Thank you. It's great to have an update on this information. So I thank everyone for participating tonight. I do have some, questions for the demographic study, but I don't know if they're more question or discussion. So if you want to do public comment first, that's fine. Okay.
Trustee Lambert?
Real quick, a lot of comments, but when will the reports and even the preliminary reports be available to the board and to the public to review and look at? And I hope it's before the final report so that people have a chance to comment on it before the very end.
Absolutely, we can make the reports available.
Thank you.
Any further questions from trustees? Vice President Henry?
There's one follow-up question on my questions. How does our current 75% return is not the right word, but yield rate, I guess, for kindergarten, sorry, how does that compare? What did you see across the state?
Yeah, and I have to disappoint you a little bit on that because it's really hard to do apples to apples, and I'll back up a little bit and explain how the birth data is presented by the California Department of Public Health. Especially this might head off some future questions. So this is tracked uh, ideally based on the residence of the person giving birth, regardless of where the birth occurred. But the most discrete level of detail that you can get is either a particular city or any number of zip codes. And I tend to use zip codes because that gives me the most ability to sync up, the birth giving population with the school district boundary. But inevitably, they're never a perfect fit. And so you have to make decisions on ones that are anything approaching half and half, in terms of, kind of half in and half out of a school district, what's being included. So sometimes that's a big part of the reason that you will see things that are dipping, well below 100%, is that some of those births that we're looking at are actually for people who live outside of your district. And the important thing is that we're using the same pool every time and looking at the same ratio to track how it's changing, and still giving us the ability to say, if we know how many births there were, that gives us a good idea of how many kindergartners there's going to be, which is true in your case. In that full report, what you will see is an analysis of local private school enrollment, and in your area, I imagine it will be relevant to also look at some independent charter schools that are around, just to see what, again, we don't have direct data of who has left one place to go to another, but we can track enrollment trends across different types of educational options and kind of get that sense when compare, and also compare your uh, kinder enrollment in a given year with what the census data indicates are the population of school-age children that are in the district at that time. And so there's a few ways we can slice things up, a few things we can look at to give you that sense of how many of the children who live here who could be enrolled with us are choosing to do so. Because the birth capture rate, as I sometimes call it without thinking, there's a number of birth to kindergarten ratio, a number of terms you can use, is really dependent. And I would have to pull my mapping up and see how much of your territory that I'm pulling the births from includes some people who aren't technically in your district. So there's sort of a long-winded answer, but there's a lot of nuance to explain there. And I can't just hold you up to some other district that maybe is pulling 90%, because that just might be a function of how their zip codes line up better with their school district boundary.
Thank you. I think we will see information, it sounds like, coming in the report that was
Absolutely.
the question.
Mr. Conley.
Yeah, you know, some questions, you talk about what's in the pipeline in terms of the city development.
Mhm.
You looked at all it, or do you worry about things like the housing element, or the city, for example, has an R3 zoning update that's supposed to be finalized this spring?
Mhm.
Those things that feel relevant, or do they not seem as relevant to kind of the long-term demographic data?
And for long term, i.e., if we're looking at that 10 plus years out range, absolutely, especially if we see, for example, that zoning update relatively quickly lead to some more specific project applications, where again, once you have a higher allowable density or things like that, you suddenly see some projects that pencil better for the developers at that point. Housing elements, while certainly they have a lot more teeth, for lack of a better word, than they have in some previous cycles. I learned the hard way early in my career not to project a lot based on, uh, regional housing needs assessments and housing element goals. But I really wait until, as I showed you tonight, we see an actual developer who's willing to spend money to build something has put in a proposal and the planning authorities have approved that proposal. That's the point where I get serious about seeing what that's going to mean for your future enrollment. And as I said, right now, we're looking at something in the 500 something unit range that meets those criteria.
Great. That makes sense. And then when we're talking about affordable housing, which has that higher yield rate of
Mhm.
students, do you ever look at the unit mix? So the number of bedrooms that are available, because one of the controversies around affordable housing is often what gets built is single bedroom units because they're cheaper. But I know the city is trying to address that in some ways.
No, and that's another good question, and the kind of thing that, so typically in the scope of the report that I'm preparing right now, was probably not going to be slicing up the student generation to that extent. That's usually what you get into when you're going into maybe some detailed mitigation with a developer. But yes, you are 100% correct that obviously, if you're building affordable housing with 2, 3, even 4 bedrooms, which I've seen some places, you are going to get more kids out of that probably than if you're building studio and 1 bedroom. And so we can look at that. I have done that in some places where we've gone through and split up the number of bedrooms and done much more detailed student generation rates. I think for the purposes of our planning here, it really is that just sort of baseline based on what's been built. You get about 15 times more student yield than you do from market rate things and affordable things. But yes, if someone was going to build 200 units that were all 1 bedroom and someone else was going to build half that number, but they were going to be 2+ bedroom, that would be worth looking at, particularly at that micro. What's the impact to the school whose boundary that's going to be in? Maybe a little bit more so than that high level overall district number planning. But no, you are correct. And another thing I've learned from early on is there's always a deeper hole to dig into and a finer way to cut the data. And you sort of need to pick your scope relatively early on. But that said, part of what we're here for tonight is to hear from you exactly what you think would be useful to see.
Thank you.
Further clarifying questions? With that, I'll move to public comment. Now I'll open it for members of the public who wish to address the board. Anyone in person, turn in a speaker card. And if you're online, use the raise hand function. Wait to see how many speakers we have. I see one speaker. You will get one speaker online and none in person. So I'll allocate 3 minutes. First up is Saskia Hoffman.
Hi, my name is Saskia Hoffman. I'm a Mistral parent, just for background. And I would like to bring up 2 questions, I guess. One thing I learned was that we will only have 2 incoming kinder classes next year, which is a little concerning. So I want to understand if there is still a commitment to keep this program alive, because if we are going down to 2 classes, that will eventually, well, remove a lot of kids and opportunity here. At the same time, I wanted to also bring up the facilities situation that we've been facing between the shared campus with Castro and Mistral. I read in the notes that the greening project for our school specifically has been pushed out a year, while we have the most need for actually getting better facilities from the greening project. So that is a little bit annoying on my end, but we also run into all kinds of issues with the shared campus around parking. Belt schedules are chaotic. There are no clear borders, and we have consistent negotiations between the schools. And depending on how well the principals get along, it can be really challenging for us parents. So I just wanted to bring that up, and I think that needs to be addressed, and I think this is the right point to bring up here.
Thank you. With that, I will close public comment, and now we'll return to the board for discussion. I think structurally it might be useful for us to go through the questions that were presented to us. I'm not going to limit ourselves to it, but I appreciated that for being able to respond to this report. But I'll see if there's appetite for that on the board. The ones in the presentation at the.
Yeah, I just hesitate because I don't know that some of the comments I have really fit into some of these categories, or though I would be glad to get there.
It's fair. I'll go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a number of comments about demographic reports and requests. So demographics is definitely challenging. I think Trustee Conley and I have lived through some of this, and only a few years ago, the sky was falling and looked like we would have no room at all because of the growth in North Bayshore, and that has, of course, evaporated. What I also see in City Council is that even when projects are approved, they just don't get built. After a couple of years, they get delayed, maybe a few years, and then they often don't get built at all. It just depends on the financing. So just because something is approved doesn't mean it is going to happen. Very difficult job. Another thing, affordable housing. The average median income in Silicon Valley and Mountain View is enormous, and what we call affordable housing here is really not what you would think, and you would normally think of affordable housing. It's really for high-tech workers in the industry around here. So I think that's something to consider when you look at generation rates, the actual incomes of the families that are moving in. Another thing that I'd like you to benchmark, you're absolutely, Trustee Conley brought it up about the change in the R3 zoning, pushing it up to R4 level. Another thing that has happened in Mountain View is that we have 5 transit stops, and SB 79 covers those transit stops and takes away basically all zoning for those areas. What the impact will be is yet to be seen, but it really takes up 20% of the land area in Mountain View that we have no control over as a city. I would, not asking you to guess about what's going to happen, is try to find other situations like this where there's been massive zoning changes in cities, And how did that impact the, who moved in, when they moved in, when the growth actually happened, and ultimately the impact on schools? Yeah, but it'd be difficult to do, but, do your best. Another thing I wanted to comment on is always a couple of surprising things about Mountain View, the demographics. When the city comes out with their annual report, I'm just always shocked about how many new residents we have in Mountain View that are moving in from other countries and other places nationally. Just we have a very, it's about we're such a high-tech area. It's driven by big companies and small companies where we attract different kinds of people from all over. And I don't know how that impacts the schools or not, but it's something to consider. Another thing that surprises me is that we have roughly 40% socioeconomically disadvantaged kids in our school district, which is much, much higher than, the average Mountain View population. So I think there's a lot going on, but I'm saying that these are just factors, I think, that make Mountain View different, that as you do your analysis, you have to tailor it for actually what's going on here in the community. Those are just some of my thoughts about the demographics. I talk about other things, let the other trustees have an opportunity.
Trustee Conley.
Sure. I agree Mountain View is an interesting puzzle. And it is a bit of a whiplash sitting up here, having been on the board for over 7 years and seeing how we've looked at future demographics change so significantly because of changes in the economy and plans for the future in our city. Things that I'm curious about when we look at declining enrollment, I had the opportunity to sit in a presentation by Mike Fines of FCMAT, the California School Board Association Delegate Assembly, in December, and he was talking about birth rates statewide and just the inevitability of declining enrollment everywhere in California for a long time to come, even though there are a few outliers in some areas that might bump, but most are going to have significant decline. So I don't think we're unique in that. But what size school is too small comes to mind. Another question I have is if we are worried about reaching a threshold where a school is too small, when I think about TK, I can see two different great paths. One is like an early learning center, an early learning site that is really focused on this younger population, and it's just kind of a gem of a facility. The other is trying to maintain neighborhood school size by updating with bathrooms and locating TK at neighborhood schools so we don't see those schools being closed because they're under enrolled. So I'm curious about how Superintendent Baer and staff are looking at those two trade-offs. That's all I have so far. I'm sure I'll have more.
Vice President Henry.
I'm also curious about in future presentations or that staff input on the question of what size school is too small, and even the public comment about what number of strands, how that affects program, and how we look at that with space. TK, I'm also curious about, I guess, how we approach it as that additional grade where the neighborhood model makes sense to me, or whether it's kind of its own separate program. I do feel like when I hear things from the public, they're starting to look at it really kind of as that additional grade and part of that question of, why am I not at my local school? And just as this becomes a permanent thing, how we as a district want to look at that. And I'm not sure what I think yet, but.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up on
Go ahead.
Trustee Henry's comment too, and I think that's where one of the contractor here is, the consultant is looking at the cost of the program. And, that's one of the costs, what is it having a centralized early learning center location versus having this implemented at each of our schools? I think that's pretty important, actually, because I think there's very big differences. While I'm speaking too, word came up about neighborhood school here. I think we have to be honest and say we're really a hybrid district right now. Some of it areas are neighborhood schools, but we do have choice programs that draw students from all over the district. So call it a quasi, whatever it is, we're a hybrid school system right now in the way our students are going to different schools.
I think to synthesize, I think two of the earlier comments from Trustee Lambert, Trustee Conley, around declining enrollment statewide and Mountain View's particular mix. I think it'd be interesting to understand, right, like not necessarily treated as a force of nature that we're contending with, but like a partnership with the city, right? Like they have land use control. They to decide what gets built and how, and to some extent. But like, what are the primary challenges for us to reverse some of the trends that we're seeing in decline, right? Like, so unit mix is one of them. Having that somewhere in the report would be helpful for us to, as we partner with the city on various things, discuss with them what they can do to help mitigate our problems that we're facing.
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, just in the last month or so, right? One large development came up, 400 units. They're all studio apartments, no kids. The other one surprisingly came up down in the Wisman area where they're really side by side, maybe 400 side by side houses.
Yeah.
Right. Those are going to generate kids.
And
So
we're working hard on, making good schools and a premium education for all of our students that attracts people, right? And then if we can attract more residents, and it's a mutually beneficial relationship that we have together, I think.
Yes and no, because we're a basic aid district. So our funding is not per pupil, right? It's limited.
I'm setting aside the funding issue. I think our primary job, right, is to educate students, and regardless of funding, I want to educate more students as best we can, better over time, right? I think that's
I'm quite happy to educate students as well as possible. I think Mountain View's density is going to continue to increase. That's the projection. What that means for our student population, there's always going to be, it may be that more people coming in offsets in our assessed value the funding that we might need to compensate for those students. We just kind of have to see.
You can see the bright spot of our revenue picture, right, is residential versus commercial right now. So more residential would ostensibly improve our revenue mix as well. So
Yes, I mean, it's all about, it's just that I just want the public to know we don't get money per pupil because we're not a LCFF district. We're a community funded district. So it's based on the change in assessed value. I think the thing that I'm struggling a little bit more with here tonight is coming up with master facilities plan priorities, because what's presented and provided in the packet isn't actually very detailed about the projects that are left to complete from the previous priorities. In the past, when I remember doing updates to that, and we're not voting tonight, this is just a discussion item. So I assume this is probably coming back in another presentation, Dr. Westover. What I am used to seeing is a list of the remaining things that haven't been covered yet, where they are in the priority line, what they are projected to cost, and then we have to rank that out. We just might not be at that stage yet, but it makes me hard for it. I'm finding it difficult to come up with extra priorities without having something to weigh it against. I don't want to just shoot things into the ether that are completely unrealistic given how many roofs we might still need to put on. So
precisely the same, I think, to the reaction to the second question of what needs to be prioritized in the short term, which is, I think, kind of hard to answer that without rebaselining what the rationale was initially for those and scoring the projects against that, given our current realities and projections. So I think that would be the useful thing to come out, so we can say, we wanted these different projects to happen for these reasons. That doesn't make sense anymore. Like helps us make that decision for what should be prioritized.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with last two comments. I'd also, ask, you, you're on the ground every day seeing what goes on in the district. What else do you see should be done? What other priorities, that that mm, that should be done, and these other ones are secondary with time, or help us understand what the choices are a little bit, rather than having us just sort of make intelligent guesses, or not so much intelligent.
I mean, I'm very happy to see our master facilities plan partner here with us tonight, because it was really, really important work. I feel bad that I feel like I'm not using your time well this evening.
The last comment I think is good, or the question is, what guiding principles should be used to prioritize projects moving forward? The future is really hard to predict around here, and I think things can happen very rapidly. And so flexibility is, I think, really important for our facilities. And whatever we do, that's where it comes down to. If we start closing facilities and things like that, those are difficult decisions to reverse, right? So I'm looking for flexibility.
See, Conley?
Well, and I think flexibility might be restrooms in classrooms, frankly, but
And that's where the cost.
yeah, and that is a cost.
Well, that's where it's what I heard, but I'm just going to reiterate. We're at a kind of a crux here where I think we need to be thinking about, I believe we need to be thinking about, not to overuse the word think, but what is the optimal program for students, right? As we're looking ahead. TK was a grade level that was brought on. I don't personally believe, I remember the moment, without a great deal of thought, right? There was a whole nother year of students added, and they're quite young. And now we're talking about toileting in school. They have unique needs. And does it make most sense to have those scattered across every campus? Or does it make sense to have those needs? So I think thinking about it from and I don't want an answer here, but what makes most sense for the students in this situation, right? And not necessarily the adults in the system.
Yeah, so here's another dimension, right? Maybe another person should be up there, basically representing the teachers, the education, okay, effectiveness, right? How big should classrooms be? What's too big? What's too small? How many on campus, right? To make things effective. And somebody said, when does the classroom get too small? That's a good one. When does it get too large? And I think we need that kind of input, okay, from an educational perspective, because that's what we're here for, right? We're not just pushing around rooms here and there.
Yeah.
What works for the kids?
Yeah, I think to that point, something that I feel like is maybe an enhancement to the existing kind of description. A lot of it we deal with is like site by site analysis of like, this is the space and this is the thing. Looking at it somewhat holistically across, these aren't 11 independent sites. They're a district serving lots of students. And are we configured, like a specific sections, like are we configured to satisfy that with our existing goals around outcomes and equitable resource distribution and things like that? So that I think would help frame how we align programs and how we kind of map to the capacity we have overall, right?
Yeah, and in previous exercises like this, right, diversity has been a huge issue, and we've struggled to try to make equitably diverse schools throughout the district. That's very, very challenging with the way housing is laid out in Mountain View. I'm not saying that should be a guiding priority, but it certainly should be a consideration. And I would just say, it's not so much having the numbers that's important. Going back to the education, what works for the kids best in their educational situation to meet their needs. Okay. And we never focused on that in the past, that to my knowledge.
Trustee Conley.
Yeah, I just think we might need a study session on TK at some point. I think there's just a lot more, you know, looking at the research too. So we know the benefits of, well, there are many benefits to early childhood education. We've had this conversation. And getting more families to participate in TK might actually benefit our students, their outcomes long term. Are people more likely to participate if it's located at an early learning center or if it's a neighborhood school? Is there research about that that we can look at? Are there programmatic elements that are really challenging, not just bathrooms, but programmatic instructional elements that are challenging to incorporate into an existing K-5 setting? And what are those beyond just bathrooms? And do we have the capacity to do those? And again, it all ties into, you know, we do have schools with 2 strands right now. For example, Mauna Loma has 2 strands, I believe. Many of our schools only have 2 strands right now. Okay. And so is 2 strands ideal? Is 3, you know, when I came onto the board, the work of, I came on after new boundaries had been done and we're kind of in the final stages of being implemented. And then the goal, my understanding was 450 students per school. And that is, we're nowhere near that in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, we're closer to around 350 per school. So there's just a lot to look at in our programming.
Yeah, I think just to echo that, I think I had for the question of like what opportunities exist to expand district capacity, support where growth is occurring, I think this gets to it in rather than physical capacity, but like programmatic capacity for like things we're trying to provide, right? TK is a growing program. We need to do that. Previously, we were planning the facilities plan on North Bayshore growth, which is not materialized and seems on, at least for some time here. So really getting anchoring around the programs we offer and the capacity we need for them, I think might be a helpful way for us to think through in the draft coming.
I want to echo the thought of trying to figure out TK as in what the community needs. In thinking about an early learning center, it seems like a good solution to having everything, toileting needs, all that type of specialized space in one location. But if that deters enrollment because it's not convenient for people to get their child to wherever that location is, then it may not have been worth the investment. But if we can figure out what the community would, how the community would, what would get them to enroll their child in TK, if it would be neighborhood school versus learning center, then I think it would be kind of easier to figure out the direction to head. I personally was on the boat with my child was going to be enrolled in TK in an area that was the opposite direction of where my work was. And so we chose to not have that option because it was not conducive to how our schedules, our work schedules were. So if we could have information on that from our community, I think it would help guide our decision.
Then I just want to highlight something that Trustee Lambert was talking about, that when we look at Mountain View, our housing stock is segregated in terms of the way that it's zoned, the way that it's laid out. And so our community, I will say Mountain View, my family chose Mountain View because it is more economically integrated than many of the surrounding communities. That being said, it still has income segregation within the city itself. And then we see that carry over into the neighborhood school model, which is always a challenge, and it was exacerbated the last time the boundaries were updated. And so that's another thing we need to be cognizant of as we move forward and address these things. And then when I think about master facilities plans, it's also just like, what are the nuts and bolts that if we don't do them now, it's going to be a problem? I think that comes out of being on the board that did Measure T, because we called it the unsexy bond. It was roofs, it was HVAC, it was fencing. And so just what is the nitty gritty that we need to do most urgently is usually what I would prioritize.
Well, I would think if I can just insert here, I think that there's also an intersection of how much money is available now, right? Because it might make sense to do all of this at each site because we have this much money, but if we have less, it'll make, so I think that's an important factor in this, right? Is understanding what we can get for the amount of money we have.
Trustee Lambert?
No, I think along those lines too, that's where what Trustee Conley said at the very beginning, we list with the cost and how much money. I mean, that's critical to answer these questions. But it just made me think too, is that, this is a preliminary, not that we're going out for any kind of facilities bond. I'm not suggesting that, but in a way, we can learn from some of these things and project what's needed in our facilities. We have our consultants here, are there really significant needs in any of our schools that have gotten, run down, just not useful? I can think of one building at Crittenden that, because the way it was constructed, is, not really used very effectively. And, I think there may be other things like that. To just not to necessarily do anything about them now, but just recognize it and do it on the radar. And that would give us flexibility without having to build an entirely new campus, for example. So.
And the only other piece is, and we have talked about this in the past, I don't know if we have funds for it now. Looking at incorporating in the middle schools some CTE spaces. And kind of updating there. That might not be a huge lift. I don't know. It would be adapting a classroom as opposed to building a classroom, if that makes sense.
I think, yeah, for me, I think the one thing maybe that we haven't discussed fully, but I think everyone's touched on it a little bit, are like the guiding principles for prioritizing projects. I think, to the core maintenance things, right? Like fiscal sustainability, given the elephant in the room of we still have a structural deficit and we need to make plans around that. That'll save us money in the long run. Fiscal sustainability, the equity outcomes, equitable resource distribution that we've talked about, which is in our current strategic plan, I anticipate would be in probably our successor. I doubt. I may be surprised, but I don't think folks would jettison that for the future. And then program effectiveness that we're trying to reorganize, how this maps to that. And then basically, I think just what the reality of 2026 is compared to what we thought it would be in 2019, like making sure that we line those things up. I think that probably gives us a good touch points for all of these bits.
Let's not do anything that requires gas.
While we're doing this too, just to throw out some thoughts, some more thoughts. Clearly our emphasis needs to be on educating our kids, but there's many other things as our city urbanizes. I think that the school district should, but also recognize that they contribute to children growing up. Okay, we all know there's in part of Mountain View, most of the park space is owned by our school district. Making those facilities more available, better, having places maybe indoors where kids can play and meet and things like this, and just I think of think of other kids, other needs of children as they grow up that we can help provide. Okay, and as we urbanize and as we have limited space, I just throw that out there for, for our consultants to, they see a lot of schools, they see a lot of places, what's new, what's innovative, what's exciting.
All right. Anything further?
Rebecca, anything further? Do we have enough?
No, I think this is enough unless Rob or Jean, do you have any questions?
For me, no, thank you.
Yeah, I think this was at the request of the board just to take a first initial glance at what things might look like so we could come back with something a little bit more firm for you to react to.
That'll
Thank
be
you.
in September. Is that where we're aiming, or?
That's what we're aiming for.
You all. Right. With that, we'll now move on to where are we? Item, oh, short bio break. Yes. Okay. Recess at 8:56 p.m. We are back at 9:04 p.m. Our next item is discussion action item 9F, K-12 Coalition Strategic Planning Services. Superintendent Bear, you'll present.
Yes. So, okay, we went off for a moment. Sorry. So I think our current strategic plan is expiring, and at the same time, we have received a comprehensive systems audit, and so this seems like a very logical time to engage on an update to our strategic plan, really focused on the efforts to support student achievement is where our heads are at right now. So we solicited proposals, from vendors to provide a comprehensive, inclusive, and data-informed strategic planning process. The objectives that we put forward for that plan were that it's explicitly focused on improving student outcomes and experiences. It includes measurable goals aligned with strategies and actionable tactics. It identifies clear indicators of progress and success grounded in data, including findings from our system study, and that it is practical, implementable, and usable by all levels of our organization. So we put out an RFP. We received 16 competitive proposals. Those were independently read and scored by 7 different reviewers based on the rubric there: approach and methodology, relevant experience, and demonstrated impact in K-12. Project team qualifications and capacity, understanding of MVWSD context and feasibility, schedule and ability to meet our timeline, the cost proposal and value, and then their presence in California and experience in this state. We had 4 top vendors that were ultimately interviewed and scored again. And we came forward with K-12 Coalition as our recommended provider. Their cost is $35,000. They have extensive experience, big districts, small districts. What we really came to appreciate is their understanding of how to shape priorities in data, including the systems findings that we have in front of us that we are working toward implementing and turning those into measurable goals. Understanding the nuances of our diverse community, and the interactive process that we'll need in order to get the necessary feedback. And then the use of system framework to create goals and indicators that are relevant, rigorous, and sensitive. And we did have an eye on the cost effectiveness of this. So with that, I'm bringing forward this proposal of K-12 Coalition for partnering in the development of our strategic plan update.
Clarifying questions from the board? Trustee Lambert?
Yes, I had a difficulty figuring out what the deliverables would be. And reason that's important is, I think as reading the Render report, we want to make sure that, we understand what we're asking our consultants to do, what the expectations are, and then be able to evaluate, that they've done their job and we make a good selection.
Yes, so I'm looking at the document itself on the website on the board agenda, and on page 2 there's specific deliverables in 3 stages. There's the planning and steering, there'll be board input. Ultimately, the final will be a finalized strategic plan, including an implementation roadmap, a toolkit for implementation, a monitoring template for the dashboard and key performance indicators, and materials for the board, for staff, for community.
Will there be a possibility that we're retaining this firm year after year to sort of implement this program, or are they just sort of setting up a toolkit for us to use?
It's the latter.
Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Conley?
I mean, when I look at, I'm excited by the thoroughness of the RFP process, and that we had 16 responses was fantastic. It gives our team a lot of choice, and I appreciate that the work that the evaluators did looking into it. Something that pops up online is that this company has acquired some professional development companies last year, like in the fall of last year. It's just, this might be more of a comment than a question. I apologize. It's just something to keep an eye on in the future. Is that they now own a group called Keys to Literacy, which does writing focused services, and the Professional Development Institute, which does education courses for teachers. So if we were to, when we look at our professional development, I don't know if that would be an issue or just to be mindful of.
Yep, I understand.
And just one, I think, in a similar vein to Trustee Lambert's question, I think just to drill in, I think I was looking at the cost proposal, and there's the 30,000 for the first phase, and then we're not taking any of the optional year one extended, et cetera, onward, right? This is just
We are taking, Shelley, what was the one?
the published final strategic plan. Is that?
Yes, the published final strategic plan is the one item.
I figured that was it because it added up to 35,000, but just wanted to confirm and make sure we weren't committing to like longer term.
And who will this group be interfacing with it in the district?
So I think it'll depend on the phase that they're in, right? There'll certainly be some interface with the board. There'll be some interface with a district level staff, community, teachers. It's just depending on what phase of the process they're in.
And I'm also really curious about the composition of the steering committee, how you see that playing out, because in their proposal, they talk about a strategic planning steering committee. And will we be able to appoint a board member to that steering committee?
I assume there will be, yes. When I have done these in the past, we have had broad representation, right? Including board, of course, on that.
Thank you.
No more than two.
Any further questions? All right, I will now turn to public comment. Any member of the public in person wishing to speak, please turn in a speaker card. And anyone online, use the raise hand function. See how many speakers we have. Seeing none, I will now return to the board for discussion and potential action. So just like discussion points, I think it's useful for us to kind of be clear to avoid the add-on effect of clear that, like, per the earlier questions, this ends at adoption when we get our deliverables, and not, midstream say, oh, we need a little bit more. Like, I think it's useful for us to hold ourselves to this commit, to this idea. We can reevaluate things later, but I think it's useful as we enter into this to kind of be clear on the scope that we're getting. And then I think a couple of things for a successful plan. I think I'm always really want to make sure we get leading indicators for these long-term plans. I'll say it over and over again. I want to find out, like, as we're doing this as quickly as we can, what's working. And I also want to make sure that we have some scope for decisions that are not just add things that we should be doing, but some explicit stop doing things that we think aren't working for us. And I think that's helpful for us to have. And then maybe the last one is just how sensitive our planning will be to fiscal stress over the coming years in case we end up in a similar situation, that we compare it back appropriately.
I think it's comforting to be reaching the point as a board where sometimes we can finish each other's sentences. So that's nice. And, in the past with the strategic plan that we did before this, we didn't have ongoing contracting with them in any way. It was, here's the product, here we go. And then move on from there. So I think all of that sounds good. I'm really looking forward to this work. I love strategic planning. I love hearing from the community. And the thing that is most important to me in this work is that it's community driven. Because when we see changes in boards, when we see changes in superintendents or other leaders throughout our district, the strategic plan wasn't any one person's kind of agenda. It was something that was developed by the community at large, and that helps us all kind of hew true to that strategic plan in the future.
This is an action item if we choose to.
My apologies. I make a motion that we approve the contract of $35,000 with the K-12 Coalition for Strategic Planning Services.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We will now move on to item 9G. Resolution. Pull it up. Resolution Day of the Teacher. Superintendent Bear, I think you present.
Yes, we have 3 resolutions tonight. This one, with the coming of May, it marks the recognition of the teachers that play a vital role in shaping the lives of the students here in Mount View Wisdom School District. Day of the Teacher typically celebrated on the second Wednesday in May. There's varying days that recognition seems to slide around right at the beginning of May. But this is that time of year where we want to recognize the great work our teachers are doing for our students in the classrooms. And so we are happy to recognize as well through this resolution. So I bring it forward for your consideration.
Are there any clarified questions from the board? All right, with that, I'll move to public comment on this item. Any member of the public who wishes to speak, please turn a speaker card in person or use the raise hand function online. Seeing no one to speak, do we have any discussion or action?
I make a motion that the board approve resolution number 01-043026, recognizing May 5th, 2026 as Day of the Teacher.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I think we will do a choral reading of this. And Trustee Lambert, you'll start us off.
Whereas education is the most vital activity we as a society undertake to ensure the well-being of the nation, and
whereas education is in large measure the result of the talent and commitment of teachers and their ability to inspire, encourage, and enlighten, and
whereas teaching is a profession characterized by skill, knowledge, discipline, tenacity, and creativity in the delivery of instruction, and
whereas teachers are a source of caring, concern, counseling, empathy, warmth, and love, and deserve recognition and gratitude for the invaluable work they do, and
whereas teachers in the Mountain View Wisdom School District educate and motivate students, including those that require unique skills and compassion, and
whereas teachers in the Mountain View Wisdom School District have made a crucial difference in the lives of students and are true champions for children's schools and community.
now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Mountain View Wisdom School District and the Superintendent express their gratitude and commend the teachers of the Mountain View Wisdom School District and join the Governor and Legislature of California in designating May 5th, 2026 as Day of the Teacher, and
be it further resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Mountain View Wisdom School District and Superintendent encourage activities to recognize and honor teachers on this day.
thank you. Now we will move to the next item, item 9H. This is the resolution for Classified School Employees Week. Superintendent Bear.
Yes. So also this month, third week of May is designated as Classified School Employees Week. We all know what a vital role our classified employees play as well, kind of the unsung heroes oftentimes of what goes on in our schools, supporting our students, supporting our teachers, oftentimes really making the system work. So bring forward this resolution to recognize the great work that they do for the students in Mountain View Wisman School District.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? I'll turn to public comment on this item. Any member of the public wishing to speak, use the raise hand function online or turn in a speaker card in person. I'll wait to see any speakers. Seeing none, now return to the board for discussion and action.
I move that the board approve resolution number 02043026, recognizing May 17th through May 23rd, 2026 as Classified School Employee Week.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Now for the choral reading, we'll start with Vice President Henry.
Whereas the week of May 17th through May 23rd, 2026 has been designated by the Governor and Legislature of California as Classified School Employee Week, and
Whereas classified employees support and enhance the educational process by assisting instructors, transporting students, preparing nutritional meals, maintaining buildings and grounds, and performing all technical, business, clerical, and secretarial functions, and
whereas classified school employees contribute to the establishment and promotion of a positive instructional environment and play a vital role in providing for the welfare and safety of Mountain View Wisman School District's students, and
Whereas classified employees provide services that enable the Mountain View Wisman School District to respond effectively to the needs of students, parents, teachers, administrators, and the greater community, and
whereas classified employees in the Mountain View Wisman School District are deserving of special recognition for their many contributions in a wide variety of roles to the institution of public education in this county, state, and nation.
now therefore, excuse me. Now therefore be it resolved that the Mountain View Wisman School District Board of Trustees express their gratitude and commend all classified employees for their service to the district and designate the week of May 17th to 23rd, 2026 as Classified School Employee Week.
be it further resolved that the Board of Education urges the members of our community throughout this district to recognize classified employees during this week and to applaud their hard work and dedication to the success of public education. Thank you. And now we will move on to our last item in discussion and action, item 9I, resolution honoring Jewish American Heritage Month. Superintendent Bear.
Yes, Jewish American Heritage Month is celebrated annually in May to honor the over 350-year history and contributions of Jewish Americans to American culture, science, government, and society. Mountain View Wisman School District recognizes the importance of honoring the achievements of our Jewish community members and reflecting thoughtfully on the history of pain and oppression they endured. So we honor them through the consideration of this resolution.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Being none, I'll now go to open public comment on this item. If you're in person, turn in a speaker card, and if you're online, use the raise hand function if you'd like to comment on this item. Seeing no speakers, I will now return to the board for discussion and action.
I move that we approve resolution number 03-043026, a resolution supporting the recognition of Jewish American Heritage Month.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All
Aye.
opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We will do a choral reading of the resolution, starting with Trustee Reed.
Whereas the United States, California, and the city of Mountain View are a melting pot of heritages and cultures, and
whereas Mountain View Wisman School District has honored this mosaic of people and unique contributions to our communities through commemorative months, and
whereas for centuries, the perseverance and hope of the Jewish people have inspired people around the world. And
whereas by honoring each other's cultures, we can educate ourselves about the rich diversity that makes up our community. And
whereas Jewish American culture has been inextricably woven into the fabric of our country as Jewish American suffragists, activists, and leaders march for civil rights, women's rights, and voting rights. And
whereas Jewish American scientists, doctors, and engineers have made scientific breakthroughs that define America as a land of possibilities, served our nation in uniform on the nation's highest courts and at the highest levels of the presidential administration. And
whereas as public servants, artists, entertainers, journalists, and poets, they have helped write the story of America, making it, as Emma Lazarus's poem on the Statue of Liberty states, a home for the huddled masses yearning to breathe free. And
whereas, as we celebrate the Jewish American community's contributions this month, we also honor their resilience in the face of a long and painful history of persecution. Hamas attack on October 7, 2023 against Israel marked the deadliest day for Jewish people since the Holocaust, resurfacing, including here in the United States, painful scars from millennia of anti-Semitism and genocide of the Jewish people. And
whereas to counter the rise of anti-Semitism, it is critical to increase awareness of Jewish American contributions dating back to the founding of the United States.
now therefore be it resolved that the Mountain View Eastman School District, during Jewish American Heritage Month, celebrate the immeasurable impact of Jewish values, contributions, and culture on our nation's character and recommit to realizing the promise of America for all Jewish Americans. And
therefore, be it further resolved that the Mountain View Wisman School District Board of Trustees adopts resolution number 03-043026 to encourage the celebration of Jewish American Heritage Month in the schools of the district with relevant activities and to acknowledge the significance of Jewish American Heritage Month now and always.
thank you. Now, we'll move on to item 10, board updates. Any updates members of the board want to provide? Trustee Conley.
give a very brief update. The California School Board Association President, Dr. Shade, visited Santa Clara County last week and did a tour of districts throughout the county. This is our third year kind of leading a tour. And, you know, it was just informative for myself as well, but we went to the Gilroy Unified School District and visited their CTE computer science program. And then we went to Juvenile Hall to the Osborne School in San Jose, which is run by the County Office of Ed. And we got to tour a unit within Juvenile Hall. And then they have an amazing wellness center. They have a library that's just quite beautiful. And they have a music studio with professional grade equipment. And they're very focused on restorative practices. And also, you know, when students are graduating, they're trying to get them transferred to universities. Students can take high school courses, but also community college courses while they're within their Osborne School program. So it was just very informative. Then we went to the Cupertino Union School District and visited Murdoch Portal, which is tied for #1 in U.S. News and World Reports as the best K-8 elementary school district in California this past year. And we finished at the Mount Pleasant School District at August Bulber Middle School, which has a civic engagement and avid focus school-wide. It's a majority low-income students. And the civic engagement process, within every single type of classroom, they had things like Socratic method. They had kind of what they called like the philosopher's chairs. Just this really in-depth level of discussion and engagement in middle school that was a joy to see. So it was a great day. And it was great to learn about all these programs. And some of these programs are Hoffman Award winners. So you too can learn more about that middle school, for example, who is a Hoffman Award winner. And then I also wanted to remind the board that this weekend there is a reception by our outgoing president of the county association, the school board association, on Sunday evening, I believe. That should be on your calendars. And I think there's also a breakfast on Saturday. So it's a good opportunity to reconnect with other trustees from around the county and learn about things that are going on.
Thank you. Any other updates? All right, with that, we'll move on to items for future agendas.
I'd like to see an update on housing, how staff housing is going, and also the finances.
Great news. Our committee is meeting Monday, and then we will have a present. I think we're tentatively scheduled for the 14th, but yes. Yeah. Coming up. All right. And now we'll move on to future board meeting dates. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for May 14th, 2026. Additional upcoming meetings include May 28th and June 11th. Any further business? Hearing none, having reached the end of the agenda. Meeting is adjourned at 9:30 p.m. with our next regular meeting scheduled for May 14th, 2026.